The rain started during the morning stand-up. I watched droplets trace uncertain paths down the conference room windows while Gavin Fletcher, our COO, distributed agenda packets to everyone except me. His hand moved past my chair twice. Deliberate. The paper made crisp sounds as it landed on the table in front of my colleagues. June, he said, finally acknowledging my presence. You won't be needed for the Q3 planning session. I looked up. Waited for the explanation. You take too long to think. He didn't quite sneer, but his mouth twisted into something adjacent. We need decisiveness. Quick responses. You'd just slow us down. The room went quiet. Not the productive quiet of concentration, but the uncomfortable quiet of witnesses. I felt 11 pairs of eyes trying not to look at me. My coffee had gone cold in my hands. The ceramic mug felt rough against my palms, a texture I suddenly noticed with uncomfortable clarity. I nodded once and left the room, my footsteps too loud on the tile floor. Have you ever been dismissed in front of your peers? There's a particular kind of heat that rises in your chest, not quite anger, not quite shame, but something that lives between them. It settles in your throat, makes breathing feel like a conscious effort rather than an automatic function. I returned to my desk on the 4th floor, where the analysts sat in rows like library books. Circle Technologies occupied 3 floors of a building in the financial district, and my corner faced north, toward the water. On clear days, I could see the harbor, watch cargo ships move with patient determination across the horizon. Today, I saw only gray, clouds pressing down like a lowered ceiling, turning the world monochromatic. The exclusion shouldn't have surprised me. Gavin had been with Circle Technologies for 8 months, brought in by the board to accelerate growth and drive aggressive expansion. He spoke in management consultancy phrases, used words like synergy and optimization without irony. His background included stints at 3 different tech companies over 5 years, each position lasting just long enough to implement dramatic changes before moving on. I'd been at Circle for 6 years, moving from junior analyst to senior strategist, building relationships slowly, earning trust through consistent, careful work. My approach didn't align with his philosophy of speed. I opened my laptop and returned to the risk assessment I'd been developing for the past month. The document had grown to 57 pages, each one representing hours of research, data analysis, scenario modeling. Circle Technologies provided data infrastructure solutions for mid-sized financial firms. Boring, perhaps, to outsiders. But in our world, boring meant stable. It meant clients trusted us with sensitive operations, payroll systems, transaction processing, compliance reporting. One mistake, one security breach, one compliance failure could unravel everything. The risk assessment covered our planned expansion into 3 new markets simultaneously, something Gavin championed in every executive meeting, his voice rising with enthusiasm as he pointed to growth projections on oversized monitors. My preliminary analysis suggested problems. Not catastrophic ones, necessarily, but significant enough to warrant careful consideration. Resource constraints that would stretch our teams beyond sustainable limits. Regulatory variations across jurisdictions that our legal team hadn't fully mapped. Vendor reliability issues in 2 of the target regions, discovered through careful examination of their service histories and client feedback. I'd planned to present these findings during the Q3 session. Instead, I sat at my desk, listening to the muted sounds of my colleagues in the conference room 2 floors below, their voices rising and falling like distant waves. My office phone sat silent. My calendar showed a blank space where the planning session should have been. The day moved slowly after that. I checked email compulsively, though I knew nothing urgent awaited. Attended a routine client check-in call where I smiled and nodded and provided updates while thinking about the conference room 2 floors below. Ate lunch at my desk, leftover pasta that had lost whatever appeal it possessed the night before. Lydia Park stopped by around 1 o'clock. She'd been in the planning session, one of the project managers Gavin favored because she nodded enthusiastically during his presentations and volunteered for high-visibility initiatives. That was awkward this morning, she said, perching on the edge of my desk. She wore a burgundy blazer, professional and sharp. Her expression attempted sympathy but carried undertones of curiosity, the way people look at car accidents as they drive past. I saved my document. Looked at her. Was it? Come on, June. Everyone noticed. She lowered her voice, glancing toward the elevator bank as if Gavin might materialize. For what it's worth, I think he's wrong. Your analysis saved us from that vendor disaster last year. She meant the incident with Frontline Systems, a vendor we'd nearly contracted for cloud storage migration. Everyone else had been excited about their competitive pricing and aggressive timeline. I'd spent 3 weeks analyzing their track record, found patterns of service interruptions and contract disputes, presented my findings in a memo that probably seemed paranoid at the time. 6 months later, Frontline Systems had a massive security breach that exposed data for 17 client companies. We'd dodged that catastrophe because someone had taken the time to look beneath the surface. Thanks, I said. But maybe. She hesitated, choosing words carefully. Maybe you could try to be more assertive? Speak up faster in meetings? Gavin values people who contribute immediately. He sees silence as uncertainty. I understood what she meant. I also understood that my value at Circle Technologies came precisely from my refusal to contribute immediately. Quick answers sound competent. Thoughtful answers account for complexity. There's a difference between having nothing to say and taking time to determine what needs saying. I'll keep that in mind, I said. She meant well. People usually do when they offer advice that requires you to become someone else. After she left, I sat for a moment in the particular silence of my corner office, listening to the building's ambient sounds, keyboards clicking in nearby cubicles, the elevator's mechanical sigh, someone's phone ringing 3 times before voicemail captured it. I returned to my assessment. The data told a story, but only if you looked long enough to see the pattern. Client retention rates in our existing markets had started declining, a gentle slope, barely noticeable quarter over quarter, but undeniable across the 2-year view. Our customer service response times had increased by 18%, from an average of 4 hours to nearly 5. Small enough to escape attention in individual months, significant enough to indicate systemic strain. Our development team was working at 127% capacity according to their latest sprint reports, which meant corners were being cut somewhere, stress fractures forming in the foundation. And Gavin wanted to expand into 3 new markets simultaneously. I added another section to my document, projected support ticket volumes based on current client acquisition rates, estimated onboarding costs including hidden expenses like localization and compliance documentation, likely integration challenges with regional payment systems and data protection frameworks. The numbers assembled themselves into a narrative of strain, a story about an organization stretching itself toward a breaking point. Outside, the rain intensified. Water ran down the windows in sheets now, obscuring the harbor completely. The planning session lasted 2 days. I heard fragments, excited voices in the cafeteria discussing market penetration strategies, Gavin's distinctive laugh echoing from the executive floor, someone mentioning aggressive timelines and first-mover advantage near the coffee machine. On the second afternoon, I saw the preliminary project plan circulated via email, arriving with high-importance flags and a subject line written in all capitals. Launch in all 3 markets within 4 months. Simultaneous rollout. Marketing push coordinated across regions with a unified brand message. Revenue projections that looked impressive in PowerPoint, hockey stick growth curves, market share percentages that assumed competitors would remain static while we expanded. No mention of risks. No contingency planning. No acknowledgement of resource constraints. The document read like aspirational fiction, a story about what might happen if every assumption proved correct and no obstacles emerged. I printed the plan and laid it across my desk next to my assessment. They looked like documents from different companies. Different realities. One celebrated what could go right. The other cataloged what would likely go wrong. Do you ever feel like you're seeing something no one else notices? It's a peculiar kind of loneliness, not the loneliness of being alone, but the loneliness of being the only one paying attention. Like standing on a beach watching a tsunami form on the horizon while everyone around you builds sandcastles. I could have sent an email. Could have scheduled a meeting with Gavin, presented my concerns diplomatically, offered my analysis as additional perspective to enrich the discussion. But I'd learned over 6 years at Circle Technologies that timing matters as much as content. So does receptivity. Gavin was riding high on the momentum of his planning session, surrounded by people who'd affirmed his vision and volunteered for implementation teams. Introducing contradictory data now would position me as an obstacle, someone resistant to progress rather than protective of sustainability. I decided to wait. Not passive acceptance, but strategic patience. The rain continued through Tuesday evening as I worked late, refining my assessment. I added a section on competitive analysis. Our main competitors weren't expanding simultaneously into multiple markets. They were moving methodically, establishing presence in one region before attempting another. There was wisdom in that approach, lessons we could learn if we chose to look. By Wednesday morning, the document had reached 63 pages. I sent it to our shared drive, filed under Strategic Analysis, Q3 Market Expansion, and copied the link to Gavin with a simple subject line, Risk Assessment available for review. No judgment. No accusation. Just information, available when needed. He didn't respond. 3 days later, on a Thursday morning, I was reviewing compliance documentation for our Western region clients when my office phone rang. The sound startled me. People usually communicated through Slack or email. Actual phone calls meant urgency or formality, neither of which I was expecting. Gavin's assistant. Her voice carried that particular professional politeness that masks discomfort. He needs to see you immediately. The executive floor smelled different, better coffee, probably, brewed in machines that cost more than my monthly rent. Gavin's office overlooked the harbor, with floor-to-ceiling windows that transformed weather into theater. On his wall hung a photograph of himself summiting some mountain, arms raised in victory against a crystalline blue sky. Next to it, his MBA diploma from a prestigious business school, framed in dark wood. He didn't look victorious now. Why did we miss every risk? He didn't yell, exactly, but his voice had edges. Sharp places where frustration had worn through professional composure. He stood behind his desk, hands pressed flat against the surface as if steadying himself. His tie was loosened, collar button undone, unusual for him. Gavin typically maintained careful presentation even during crises. I just got off the phone with our legal team. He spoke rapidly, words tumbling out. Apparently, we need regulatory approval in 2 of the 3 markets before we can even begin operations. Did you know that? Full licensing applications. Background checks on our executive team. Financial audits. The whole process takes a minimum of 3 months, probably longer. 3 months we don't have in our timeline. I did know that. It was on page 7 of my assessment, highlighted in yellow, with footnotes explaining the specific regulatory frameworks in each jurisdiction. And our vendor in the Eastern region, the one handling our server infrastructure, they're being acquired. The deal closes in 2 months. Complete uncertainty about whether they'll honor existing contracts or whether we'll need to renegotiate terms. Could add 6 months to our deployment schedule. Could add costs we haven't budgeted. Page 12. I'd included links to the acquisition announcement and analysis of similar situations where vendor transitions had disrupted client timelines. Our development team is apparently drowning. His hands moved through the air, grasping at something invisible. The CTO just told me we don't have capacity for 3 simultaneous launches without either delaying current client projects or hiring 20 additional engineers. 20 engineers. Do you know how long it takes to hire and onboard 20 qualified engineers in this market? The good ones have multiple offers. The onboarding process alone is 8 weeks. Page 16 included staffing projections, comparing our current capacity against the demands of triple market expansion. I'd modeled 3 scenarios: best case, realistic case, and worst case. Even the best case required significant new hires or meaningful delays to existing commitments. Why, he said, voice dropping lower, taking on a different quality, not anger anymore, but something closer to genuine confusion. Did no one raise these issues during planning? We spent 2 days in that room. 11 smart people. How did we miss all of this? The rain had stopped. Sunlight cut through the clouds, illuminating dust particles between us. They floated in the beam like tiny stars, peaceful and indifferent. I wasn't at the planning session, I said quietly. He stared at me. Something shifted in his expression, recognition, maybe, or the beginning of it. His eyes moved to his computer screen, where I imagined my email sat unopened or skimmed but not absorbed. You're the strategist. Yes. You would have. He trailed off. Sat down heavily in his chair, which creaked under the sudden weight. Show me what you have. I returned to my desk and retrieved my assessment. 63 pages, printed on recycled paper because environmental sustainability mattered to our clients. Annotations in the margins where I'd added thoughts during late-night reviews. Charts tracking resource allocation across different scenarios. Comparison tables showing our competitors' expansion strategies. Regulatory checklists for each target market. Vendor reliability scores based on industry data. Financial models showing cash flow implications under various assumptions. I'd been working on it during the hours when I should have been at the planning session. While my colleagues debated marketing slogans and revenue projections, I'd been mapping the terrain they weren't seeing. Gavin read in silence. The only sounds in his office were pages turning and, somewhere distant, a phone ringing unanswered. I watched him encounter each section, saw his expression tighten when he reached the regulatory requirements, darken at the vendor analysis, become almost pained at the staffing calculations. When he finished, he set the document down carefully, as if it might break. His hands remained on top of it, flat against the title page. This is comprehensive. I waited. When did you complete this? 2 weeks ago. The initial version. I've been updating it as new information emerges. 2 weeks. He said it like a foreign phrase, something requiring translation. Before the planning session. Yes. And you sent it to me. He checked his computer, scrolling through emails. Wednesday morning. 3 days ago. I thought you might want to review it independently. Form your own assessment before we discussed it. He made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been something else. I didn't open it. Saw the file size, assumed it could wait. I was focused on implementation details, getting teams mobilized, building momentum. Momentum without direction is just chaos, I said, then immediately regretted it. Too sharp. Too judgmental. But Gavin nodded slowly. That's accurate. He looked at me with what seemed like fresh eyes, seeing something he'd missed before. Why didn't you force your way into the meeting? Demand to present this? Show up at the conference room door and insist? The question revealed something about how he saw the world. Force. Demand. Assert. Push through resistance until people acknowledge your presence. Would you have listened? I asked. He had the grace to look uncomfortable. Shifted in his chair. Probably not. I was convinced we had the right approach. Confident in the strategy. I would have seen your concerns as. He searched for the right word. Obstacles. Resistance to change. Fear of ambition. Then it would have been a waste of both our time. But now we've wasted 3 days. Lost momentum. The team is excited, ready to move, and I have to walk back the entire plan. Not the entire plan, I said. The timelines. The simultaneity. The assumption that speed equals success. But the core vision, expanding into new markets, growing the business, that's still sound. We just need to do it sustainably. He leaned back in his chair, hands behind his head. Outside his window, the harbor glittered under emerging sun. A container ship moved slowly toward the port, patient and methodical. I made a mistake. 2 words. Simple. Difficult. I've learned that genuine accountability is rare in corporate environments, where admitting error feels like admitting weakness. We both made mistakes, I said. You assumed speed and decisiveness were always valuable, regardless of context. I assumed you'd recognize when you needed a different perspective, without me actively ensuring the information reached you. We both operated from our comfort zones instead of adapting to the situation. So what do we do now? I pulled out my phone and opened the calendar. We have 4 months until the planned launch. That's not enough time for 3 markets, but it might be enough for 1, if we choose carefully and plan thoroughly. We focus resources, execute well, build proof of concept. Then we expand methodically based on what we learn. Which market? I flipped to page 37 of the assessment. The Central Region. Better regulatory environment, they have a fast-track approval process for established companies in related sectors. Stable vendor relationships already in place through our current operations. Existing infrastructure we can leverage without major new investments. And the competitive landscape is less crowded. We'd be entering with advantages rather than fighting uphill battles in 3 directions simultaneously. He studied me for a long moment. That's not the aggressive growth the board wants. They're expecting big moves. Bold statements. Market disruption. No, I agreed. It's the sustainable growth the company needs. There's a difference. Aggressive growth looks impressive in presentations. Sustainable growth keeps companies alive long enough to actually achieve their vision. Which would you rather deliver, exciting announcements or actual results? He didn't answer immediately. I watched him process the choice, saw the tension between his instincts toward boldness and his emerging recognition of reality's constraints. The board will push back, he said finally. Then we give them data. Show them the regulatory timeline. The vendor situation. The resource constraints. Present it as strategic prioritization rather than retreat. We're not abandoning growth, we're ensuring successful growth. There's a narrative there that doesn't require spinning failure as success. You've thought about this. It's what I do. Think about things. A smile flickered across his face. Right. The thing I criticized you for. The restructured plan took shape over the following weeks. Not in dramatic meetings or confrontational exchanges, but through the quieter work of collaboration. Gavin invited me to present the risk assessment to the executive team, a Tuesday morning meeting where I walked through each section, answered questions, fielded objections from people invested in the original timeline. Our CFO appreciated the financial modeling. Our CTO visibly relaxed when I addressed the staffing concerns. Our head of legal practically sagged with relief when I outlined the regulatory strategy. Only the VP of sales seemed disappointed, having already begun recruiting plans based on triple market expansion. So we're retreating? She asked, arms crossed. Her name was Diane Holloway, and she'd been with Circle for 3 years, building our sales team from 5 people to 30. We're being strategic, Gavin said, and I noticed he'd adopted my framing. June's analysis shows that simultaneous expansion would stretch us beyond sustainable limits. Better to succeed decisively in one market than struggle in 3. But the competitors are also struggling, I interjected, clicking to a slide showing their recent quarterly reports. Kendrick Solutions tried dual market expansion last year. Revenue projections looked great initially. 6 months later, they had to withdraw from one market completely due to compliance issues. Cost them credibility and $12 million in sunk costs. We can learn from their experience instead of repeating it. The meeting lasted 2 hours. By the end, we had consensus, reluctant from some, enthusiastic from others, but consensus nonetheless. We chose the Central region. Delayed the other launches by at least 12 months, pending successful proof of concept. The board grumbled but accepted the rationale when Gavin, to his credit, presented it as his decision, his learning, his evolution. He didn't blame the planning session participants or claim he'd been misled. He took ownership of the initial overreach and the strategic correction. That earned him respect, even from board members who wanted more aggressive growth. I sat in that board presentation, watching Gavin use language from my assessment, seeing concepts I'd developed presented to the decision-makers who'd hired him to accelerate growth. There was no resentment in observing this. Just satisfaction that the information had reached its intended destination, even through an indirect path. People noticed the shift. Not immediately, organizational change happens gradually, like seasons transitioning. But over the following weeks, the atmosphere changed. Lydia stopped by my desk again, this time without advice, just genuine curiosity about the new timeline and how her project fit into the revised strategy. I'm impressed, she said. You didn't gloat. Didn't say, I told you so. A lot of people would have. What would be the point? I asked. We're all trying to build something sustainable here. Scoring points feels good momentarily but doesn't help the company succeed. She tilted her head, considering. That's very mature. Maybe too mature. Don't you ever want credit for being right? I thought about that. I want the company to make good decisions. Whether I get credit is secondary. Besides, Gavin acknowledged the value of the analysis. That's enough. Is it though? Usually. In organizations, you have to choose between being right and being effective. Sometimes you can be both. Often you have to pick one. I'd rather be effective. Others asked questions, sought my input on their projects. The careful work of building trust, one conversation at a time. My calendar filled with meetings I hadn't requested, people wanting risk assessments for their initiatives, seeking frameworks for decision-making, asking how to balance ambition with realism. Gavin changed too, though not dramatically. Fundamental personality shifts don't happen through single lessons. But he started asking different questions in meetings. What are we missing? What haven't we considered? What could go wrong that we're not discussing? He scheduled standing sessions with me, Friday mornings, before the week's chaos accumulated, to review upcoming initiatives through what he called June's lens. I need you to be the person who sees what I don't, he said during one of those sessions, coffee cooling between us while rain drummed against the windows. My instinct is always toward action. Movement. That's valuable, but it's incomplete. You see the terrain. The obstacles. The consequences. And your instinct toward action is valuable too, I said. I can identify every possible risk and still not move forward. Paralysis by analysis. We balance each other. He smiled. That's diplomatic phrasing for you rush in and I pull you back. Sometimes. Other times you push me forward when I'd overthink indefinitely. Balance works both directions. It wasn't about vindication. I never felt the need to say, I told you so, or remind anyone of the exclusion from the planning session. The work spoke for itself. The revised plan proceeded smoothly, not without challenges, but without catastrophic failures. Our Central Region launch, executed with appropriate caution and thorough preparation, succeeded beyond initial projections. Client acquisition exceeded targets by 23%. Our customer service metrics improved because we had adequate support staff. Our development team delivered on schedule because we hadn't overcommitted their capacity. The regulatory approvals came through on time because we'd planned for that timeline instead of hoping it would accelerate. 6 months later, Gavin stopped by my desk unexpectedly. He didn't usually venture to the 4th floor. Executives tended to summon people upward rather than descending to analyst territory. I've been thinking about what happened, he said without preamble. When I excluded you from planning. That was a while ago. I saved my current document, another risk assessment, this one for the Eastern region expansion we were finally ready to pursue. I know. But I wanted to say, I've been in leadership roles for 15 years. Lots of companies. Started as a management consultant, moved through operations roles, always climbing. I got promoted because I made quick decisions, moved fast, showed confidence even when uncertain. And that worked, mostly. Got me here. Got me responsibility and authority and the trust of boards. He paused. Until it didn't. I turned to face him fully, giving him complete attention. You taught me something important, he continued. Sometimes the most decisive thing you can do is slow down. Gather information. Consider implications. It feels counterintuitive. Feels like weakness or hesitation. But it's actually a different kind of strength. And you taught me something too. He raised his eyebrows, surprised. I was too passive. I knew the planning session would fail without proper risk analysis, but I accepted exclusion too easily. I should have found another way to make sure the information reached the decision makers. Not by forcing my way in, but by being more creative, more persistent. Maybe I should have sent the assessment to the entire team beforehand. Or requested 15 minutes with the board. Or built alliances with people who would raise the concerns if I couldn't be in the room. So we're both learning. Still learning, I corrected. Always learning. The moment you think you've figured everything out is the moment you stop growing. He nodded slowly, then gestured toward my screen. Eastern Region Assessment? Yes. Want to see the preliminary findings? Absolutely. Friday morning? Perfect. He returned to the elevator, and I returned to my work, thinking about growth and change and the complicated ways we learn from each other. The rain returned that afternoon, gentler this time, more mist than downpour. I watched it from my desk, thinking about lessons and evolution and the distance we'd traveled in 6 months. In organizations, in relationships, in life itself, we're constantly navigating the tension between action and reflection, speed and thoroughness, confidence and humility. There's no perfect balance. Just continuous calibration. Constant adjustment based on feedback and circumstances and the specific challenges we face. I've been thinking a lot about silence lately. Not the uncomfortable silence of exclusion, but the productive silence of deep consideration. In a world that rewards quick responses and immediate reactions, there's something quietly radical about saying, "Let me think about that." About taking the time to see patterns, identify risks, understand complexity before committing to answers. Some people mistake thoughtfulness for hesitation. They see careful analysis as weakness rather than strength, indecisiveness rather than thoroughness. But I've learned that the ability to sit with uncertainty, to gather information before forming conclusions, to resist the pressure for premature certainty, these are forms of courage too. Different from the courage of quick action, but no less valuable. Maybe more valuable in contexts where mistakes carry significant consequences. Do you know what I mean? Have you ever been in a situation where your natural approach was dismissed, only to be vindicated later? Not in a triumphant way, but in that quiet recognition that maybe your instincts were sound all along? I'd love to hear your stories. How did you navigate the aftermath? Did the experience change how you advocate for your perspective? Did you become more assertive, or did you find other ways to ensure your voice reaches the people who need to hear it? The Central Region expansion succeeded, which led to the Eastern Region launch 8 months later. This time, the planning included comprehensive risk assessment from the beginning. Gavin insisted on it, made it a mandatory step in our project methodology. We moved methodically, addressed challenges as they emerged, adapted when necessary without feeling like failures.